July 11th, 2015, 9:52 p.m., the most secure prison in Mexico. Inside cell number 20, the world's most wanted drug lord is doing push-ups. Security cameras are watching. Guards are stationed every 50 feet. This man has a $5 million bounty on his head. From the U.S. government, by 9:53 p.m., he's gone. Not through the door, not through the window. He vanished into thin air from a maximum security prison that was supposed to be escape-proof. The FBI called it impossible. The DEA called it embarrassing. The U.S. government called it a national security threat. This is the story of how one 5'6" man from rural Mexico became America's public enemy #1. How he built a drug empire worth $14 billion. How he smuggled more cocaine into the United States than any human in history. And how he made the most powerful government on earth look like amateurs twice. Welcome to the real story of El Chapo, the man who fooled America. To understand how El Chapo embarrassed the U.S. government, we need to go back to where it all began. Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera was born in 1957 in La Tuna, a tiny village in the mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico. But here's what most Americans don't know. La Tuna is only 600 miles from the U.S. border, close enough that young Joaquin could literally see American planes flying overhead, close enough that he knew exactly where the money was. His nickname, El Chapo, means shorty in Spanish. At 5 feet 6 inches, he was small in stature, but enormous in ambition. While American kids were playing Little League, Chapo was already selling drugs by age 15. While American teenagers were worried about prom, Chapo was building his first smuggling tunnel. By the 1980s, something was happening in America that would make El Chapo one of the richest men on the planet. The crack epidemic was exploding across U.S. cities. From Los Angeles to New York, from Chicago to Miami, Americans were desperate for cocaine, and Chapo was ready to supply it. But here's the genius part. While other cartels were fighting over territory, Chapo was thinking like a Fortune 500 CEO. He didn't just want to sell drugs, he wanted to revolutionize how drugs entered America. Picture this. It's 1989. The U.S. government has spent billions on border security. They've got walls, cameras, motion sensors, and thousands of Border Patrol agents. American politicians are promising voters that the border is secure. Meanwhile, 30 feet underground, El Chapo is building something that would make the U.S. government look foolish. For decades, the first tunnel was discovered in 1990. It connected a house in Tijuana, Mexico, to a warehouse in San Diego, California. It was 1,200 feet long, had electric lighting, ventilation systems, and even a small railway. The DEA called it sophisticated. The FBI called it unprecedented. El Chapo called it Tuesday, because while American authorities were celebrating finding one tunnel, Chapo had already built 5 more. By the time they found the second tunnel, he had built 10 more. It was like playing whack-a-mole with a genius. These weren't just holes in the ground. These were engineering marvels. Some tunnels were 2,000 feet long. Some had hydraulic doors that opened with remote controls. Some had air conditioning systems better than most American homes. The U.S. government was spending $4 billion a year on border security. El Chapo was spending $2 million per tunnel and making that money back in 2 weeks. Do the math. Who was winning? By the 1990s, El Chapo wasn't just smuggling drugs into America. He was flooding America with drugs. His Sinaloa cartel was responsible for 80% of the cocaine entering the United States. 80%. Think about that. 4 out of every 5 lines of cocaine snorted in America came from one man in Mexico. From Chicago to Boston, from Houston to Seattle, El Chapo's product was everywhere. The U.S. government was furious. This wasn't just about drugs anymore. This was about America's reputation. How could the world's most powerful country be humiliated by one man? In 1993, they put El Chapo on the FBI's most wanted list. The reward, $5 million. For context, that's more than they offered for most terrorists. The DEA created a task force with one mission: capture El Chapo. But here's what made El Chapo different from every other drug lord. He wasn't flashy. He didn't want attention. While other cartel leaders were buying golden guns and pet tigers, Chapo was wearing cheap clothes and driving beat-up cars. He was a ghost. For 8 years, he evaded the most sophisticated manhunt in history. The FBI had satellites. The DEA had informants. The U.S. government had a $5 million bounty on his head. El Chapo had something better. He had disappeared. June 9th, 1993, Guatemala City. After 8 years of hiding, El Chapo made his first mistake. He trusted the wrong person. A tip came in to Guatemalan authorities. days, El Chapo was hiding in a safe house. Within hours, he was surrounded. No dramatic shootout, no Hollywood-style chase. The world's most wanted drug lord was captured while eating breakfast. The U.S. government celebrated. Finally, they had their man. But here's where the story gets interesting. El Chapo wasn't extradited to the United States. Instead, he was sent to Puente Grande, a maximum security prison in Mexico. The U.S. government wasn't happy, but they figured justice would be served. They were wrong. What happened next would become legendary in Mexico and embarrassing for America. El Chapo didn't just serve his time, he took over the prison. Within 2 years, he was running his drug empire from his cell. He had cell phones, computers, and regular visits from his lieutenants. Prison guards were on his payroll. The warden was taking bribes. El Chapo had turned Mexico's most secure prison into his personal headquarters. And this is just the beginning of how El Chapo made the U.S. government look like amateurs. What happens next is so unbelievable, so audacious, that when you hear it, you'll understand why this story became legendary. But before we continue, I have to ask, what do you think El Chapo's biggest advantage was? Was it his intelligence, his network of corrupt officials, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious what you think. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into one of the most incredible true crime stories of our time, make sure to subscribe to Unblinks. We bring you the untold stories, the hidden details, and the shocking truths that other channels won't cover. January 19th, 2001, 10 p.m., Puente Grande Prison. El Chapo was scheduled to be transferred to a U.S. prison the next morning. After 8 years in Mexican custody, he was finally going to face American justice. The U.S. government had won, or so they thought. By 10:05 p.m., El Chapo was gone. Not through the front door, not through the back door. According to the official report, he escaped, hidden in a laundry cart. A laundry cart. The world's most wanted drug lord, who had been under 24-hour surveillance, simply vanished in dirty sheets. The U.S. government's reaction? This is impossible. The FBI's reaction? This is embarrassing. The DEA's reaction? How did this happen? But here's the real story. El Chapo didn't escape in a laundry cart. He walked out the front door in a police uniform with a police escort because he had been planning this escape for 2 years. He had bribed 71 prison employees, 71, from guards to administrators to the prison director himself. He had turned Mexico's most secure prison into his personal revolving door. The U.S. government had spent 8 years celebrating his capture. El Chapo had spent 8 years planning his comeback. For the next 13 years, El Chapo was a ghost again. But this time, he wasn't just hiding, he was expanding. While the U.S. government was searching for him, El Chapo was building the most sophisticated drug empire in history. His tunnels became legendary. One tunnel, from Tijuana to San Diego, was 2,400 feet long and had a full railway system. Another tunnel had an elevator. The U.S. government was spending $25 billion a year on the war on drugs. El Chapo was making $3 billion a year selling drugs. He was winning. But here's what really made American authorities furious. El Chapo wasn't just selling drugs. He was becoming a folk hero. In Mexico, people saw him as a Robin Hood figure, someone who had outsmarted the powerful Americans, someone who couldn't be caught. The U.S. government put him on the Forbes billionaire list. They increased his bounty to $5 million. They created multiple task forces. They offered immunity to anyone who could find him. El Chapo responded by building more tunnels. February 22nd, 2014, Mazatlan, Mexico. After 13 years of freedom, El Chapo was finally captured again. This time, the U.S. government made sure they got their man. He was extradited to the United States and put in the most secure prison in America. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened between his recapture and his extradition is the most embarrassing chapter in this entire saga. July 11th, 2015, Altiplano Prison, Mexico, the same prison where we started this story. El Chapo was doing push-ups in his cell at 9:52 p.m. By 9:53 p.m., he was gone. This time, he didn't walk out the front door. He didn't hide in a laundry cart. He disappeared out through a hole in his shower floor, a hole that led to a tunnel that was 1.5 miles long, had motorcycle tracks, ventilation systems, and electric lighting. The U.S. government's reaction? It went beyond embarrassment. This was humiliation. How do you lose the same man twice? How do you let him escape from a maximum security prison using the same method he'd been using for 30 years? El Chapo had done it again. He had fooled the U.S. government twice. El Chapo was finally captured for the last time in 2016. He was extradited to the United States and sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. He's currently serving his sentence in ADX Florence, the most secure prison in America. But his legacy isn't just about drugs or money. It's about how one man, through intelligence, planning, and audacity, repeatedly embarrassed the most powerful government on earth. El Chapo proved that sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the biggest army or the most money. Sometimes it's the one who's smarter than you think, and that is how El Chapo fooled the U.S. government twice. If you want more incredible true stories like this one, subscribe to Unblinks and hit that notification bell. We dig deeper into the stories that shaped our world. What other seemingly impossible stories would you like us to cover? Let us know in the comments below.